The villagers had long forgotten she was a woman. To them, she was simply the one who waited. No child laughed in her compound, no lullaby danced from her lips. Her name. A joke. But even that was mostly whispered, like the name of an old song no one dared sing. Every morning, she bathed in silence. Every evening, she sat by her clay pot, rubbing her belly as though it still held promise. 15 years had passed. That's not a short walk. That's a journey with dust on your feet and waiting in your bones. Her husband, Aramu, had tried everything. From herbalists with teeth black like charcoal to prophets who shouted down the rain. Still, a joke's womb kept its secrets. She never cried in public. But sometimes, if you passed their hut at night, you might hear her humming. The tune. Soft. Almost like she was rocking something that wasn't there. Then came the festival of Yam. Drums were beating. Girls were spinning. Boys were leaping over fire. A joke danced too, but hers was different. Her feet barely touched the ground. Her eyes were closed. Her arms moved like they remembered something forgotten. And just as the final drumbeat faded, she fell. Not like a stone. Like a leaf. The healer said she was only tired. But a joke knew something had changed. That night, she dreamt of a woman cloaked in feathers. Her skin was glowing, and her hair was white like fresh cotton. She didn't speak. She only placed her palm on a joke's belly and nodded. When a joke woke up, she felt it, the flutter. A tiny kick. A whisper of life. No one believed her at first. They thought grief had finally made her mad. But days turned to moons, and her belly swelled like a gourd in the rains. Aramu built a small stool and carved a rattle. The village women came with kolanut and songs. Even the wind seemed to carry a tune just for her. 9 moons later, at the edge of the harmattan, the baby came. No crying. No wailing. Just silence and snow-white hair that glowed in the lantern's light. A boy, round and warm, with eyes like midnight. The midwife dropped her calabash. A joke smiled and whispered, "I told you he was coming." The whispers started before the cock crowed. They say his hair shines even in the dark. A joke's child doesn't cry. Maybe she didn't carry him, maybe he came from the sky. By morning, every hut in the village knew. Even the goats seemed to stare longer than usual. Children ran to peek through the window holes, pressing their faces against the clay walls like honey seekers. But inside a joke's compound, peace floated in the air like incense smoke. The boy, small as a curled bean, slept quietly, fingers balled into soft fists, hair glowing like the back of a snail shell under sunlight. His name. Abalua. The king from the gods. Aramu couldn't stop pacing. Why's he not crying? Boys cry. I cried. My father cried. A joke simply smiled. He doesn't need to. He's heard everything already. Strange things began to follow his birth. The first rain came out of season. It fell only over their roof, soaking the dry grass gently, then stopping as if the sky had finished its message. The next morning, cassava sprouted in places it had never grown. Abalua opened his eyes on the 7th day. No blinking. Just a long, deep stare, as if he was scanning the world for something it had forgotten. The dog barked and ran. The rooster went quiet. And the elders began to call meetings they didn't name. Maman-La, the oldest woman in the village, walked barefoot across 3 compounds to see him. Her back curved like a question mark, her voice rustled like leaves. She stood at the door, nodded, and said, "I saw that hair once before." Everyone leaned in. She closed her mouth and walked away. By the time Abalua was 3 weeks old, he had smiled at every animal in the yard. None dared disturb his sleep. Not even the stubborn goat that used to climb every cooking stone. When he yawned, the wind moved through the trees like it was listening. The village was changing. A boy with white hair, born after 15 years, carrying silence in his lungs and light on his head, it was enough to twist the heart of even the strongest believer. Some people prayed harder. Some grew afraid. A joke, though, began to sing again. Her voice, once hoarse from sorrow, now danced like morning dew on grass. She tied a red cloth around her waist and carried Abalua on her back like he was the answer to every riddle. And maybe he was. But not everyone smiled. Old Baba Ojo, who sat under the Irako tree all day chewing bitter leaf in memory, watched the boy each time he passed. He'd seen things. Too many. He spat, shook his head, and muttered, "Every light calls its shadow." Abalua was no ordinary child. By the time he was crawling, he was drawing shapes in the sand, circles, stars, lines that curled like sleeping snakes. A joke would sweep them away each evening, but by dawn, they returned, fresh and neat, as if traced by the moon itself. He didn't babble. He spoke his first word on the 40th night: return. Return to what? To whom? The chickens didn't care. The villagers did. Mama Jimmy dropped her water pot when she heard it. The twins from across the stream ran home and told their father. That night, the village square buzzed like a lantern flame surrounded by moths. The elders sat in a tight circle. The chief tapped his ivory staff. White hair. Strange words. Signs in the soil. Are we dealing with a child or a messenger? Someone suggested taking him to the diviner. Someone else whispered, or to the king. But a joke wasn't having any of it. "My child is not a riddle," she said, clutching Abalua like a calabash full of honey. "He's not ours alone," the chief replied. The next morning, 3 goats escaped from their pens and were found standing by the child's window. They refused to move, even when beaten with palm fronds. They just stood there, calm as river stones, watching him sleep. By his 6th month, Abalua had stopped eating mashed yam. Instead, he reached for things he shouldn't: red cola, bitter bark, salt from the cooking pot. A joke worried, but every time he swallowed something strange, his skin glowed faintly, like fireflies were dancing beneath it. Aramu said, "This is not hunger. This is memory." Nobody laughed. One afternoon, the earth trembled. Not a quake, not quite. Just a shiver. Like the land had sighed. It happened when Abalua clapped his hands for the first time. No thunder, no lightning. Just that quiet, rolling tremble, and a crack down the village's oldest wall. The villagers started coming with offerings. Pap leaves folded with coins. Necklaces. Feathered charms. Even ripe bananas, though Abalua never touched them. They said he was a seer. A spirit child. A blessing. A warning. But behind every gift was a question no one dared ask aloud. Was he truly a gift, or a test? The diviner finally arrived. Not invited, just walked in one morning with his staff tapping the ground like a blind man chasing thunder. His eyes were milky white. His breath smelled of pepper and smoke. "I dreamt of white fire," he said, "and it had your son's laugh." He didn't touch the child. He just stood near and whispered, "The gate is open." Abalua yawned and reached for the man's staff. The diviner dropped it. Then he turned and walked away, barefoot, not saying another word. The moon hid behind the clouds that night. Even the stars seemed unsure, blinking slowly like tired eyes. A joke couldn't sleep. She wrapped Abalua tightly to her back and stepped outside. The air felt thick, like soup left too long on fire. Not hot. Just heavy. She looked up at the sky and whispered, "If you sent him, don't take him back." The wind didn't answer. But the leaves rustled in a language older than drums. Aramu was already sitting by the fire. His hands rubbed together, not for warmth, but out of worry. He'd stopped speaking much. Not because he had nothing to say, but because every word felt too small. What do you say when your son speaks to shadows? Because Abalua had started doing just that. Not loudly. Just soft mumbles in the dark. Looking into corners where no feet had stepped. Smiling at nothing. Sometimes nodding, as if receiving instructions. A joke had watched, chest tight, mouth dry. Still, he never cried. Not once. The villagers began to pull away. First came silence. No more visits. No more songs at their doorstep. No more coconuts in baskets. Then came the signs. Charms hung on trees near their house. Salt poured in lines across the paths. Eyes watching from behind curtains of plantain leaves. But the goats kept coming. 7 of them, now. Sitting each morning outside his window like guards made of fur and horns. One evening, Abalua touched the soil beside their compound and whispered a word nobody understood. The next morning, a small pool appeared, clear water, round like a mirror. The elders came to see it. They bent over, looking in, and what they saw made them stumble back. Each man saw something different. Chief Tolu saw himself younger, dancing in a masquerade. Baba Ojo saw a blackbird eating the sun. Mama Jimmy saw her dead daughter waving at her. The pool dried up the next day. Nobody ever spoke of it again. By his first birthday, Abalua had hair like a crown of clouds. It no longer just glowed. It shimmered. It moved. Sometimes, it stood still even when the wind blew. And sometimes, it swayed on its own, even when the air was quiet. A joke held him tighter. That night, she had another dream. This time, the feathered woman returned. But she wasn't alone. Beside her stood a man with bark for skin and eyes like burning coal. They both looked at Abalua and said, "The 3 paths open soon." A joke woke with sweat on her brow and the scent of burnt leaves in her nose. When she looked at her son, he was already awake. Smiling. Morning rolled in without birdsong. Even the cockerel, proud and punctual, stayed quiet. It perched on the roof and stared east, as if waiting for something older than light. A joke rose before the sun, breath shallow, ears tuned to every creak. She knew that kind of silence. The kind that came before something big. Not trouble, exactly, but shift. Like when the wind turns just before the first drop of rain. Abalua was already awake, sitting cross-legged in his raffia basket, staring at a lizard on the wall. The lizard didn't blink. Neither did he. Aramu entered, his eyes red with sleep but his hands steady. "He's not just a child," he said without looking at anyone. "He's something placed in our care." A joke nodded. She'd stopped asking questions. Every answer was a new riddle, and every riddle ended at Abalua's feet. That morning, 3 strangers arrived. Not the usual kind. Not traders. Not wanderers. These ones wore robes stitched with silver lines that shimmered like moonlight on water. They had no dust on their feet, though they claimed to have walked from across the rivers. Their leader spoke in riddles. "We've heard of the child with white fire," he said, bowing low. "The one who remembers before being born." A joke didn't speak. Her eyes did. They asked to see him. Not hold him. Not touch. Just see. She allowed it. When they entered, Abalua stood on his own. He looked at them like he knew their names, their homes, their dreams. One of the men trembled and dropped to his knees. The others followed. The boy said nothing. Later that day, a tree fell on the edge of the village. No storm. No axe. It simply collapsed, roots and all. The trunk split open, revealing strange carvings, spirals, symbols, and one word, soon. Nobody claimed the writing. Mom-in-law walked around the tree 3 times and sat beside it for hours, humming a song no one had heard before. When she returned, she only said, "The world is listening now." From that day on, things became unusual. The river changed direction for one morning, then returned. Fish swam backward. Palm fronds whispered words in the wind. And Abalua began to walk. Not just stumble, walk with purpose, with rhythm, with quiet command. He walked in circles. He walked through fireflies that refused to scatter. He walked straight to the irako tree and placed his palm on it. It shivered. Baba Ojo saw it. He dropped his walking stick and whispered, "It begins." A joke clutched her wrapper. Aramu held her hand. Neither spoke. Because even the soil had started to pulse beneath their feet. The market didn't open that day. Traders arrived, laid out their baskets, then packed them up without selling a thing. It wasn't fear. It was pause. Like the village itself held its breath. Even the goats stayed near home. Abalua had begun speaking in full sentences. Not often. Just enough to confuse everyone. He'd say things like, "The sun walks backwards when you don't look," or "Tomorrow is hiding in the yam barn." And once, while chewing on a piece of bitter leaf, he whispered, "The sky knows my name." A joke started sleeping with one eye open. Not because she feared him, but because she feared the world might come for him. And it did. One night, as the fire cracked low and the moon floated like a dropped coin in water, a group of masked figures entered the village. They made no noise. Their feet touched the ground without sound, their masks carved from wood dark as night, eyes hidden behind slits. They stopped outside a joke's compound. No words. No threats. Just a small drumbeat, talk, 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 played slowly, as if to say, "We are here." Aramu stepped out first, holding a rusted cutlass. His hands shook, not from fear, but from the weight of not knowing what stood before him. A joke came next, Abalua in her arms, his white hair glowing softly, lighting their faces in silver. One of the masked ones stepped forward. Taller than the others. Robe brushing the earth like mist. He raised a staff made of twisted wood and spoke in a voice like dry wind scraping a calabash. "The boy is marked." A joke's grip tightened. "We have seen him in our visions," the figure continued. "He walks where mortals dare not walk. He calls things that should not wake." Aramu raised his blade. "Say what you came to say, then leave." Another masked one stepped forward. "He must be taken to the mountain. The Ancient One calls him." A joke stepped back. "No. He is not yours alone," the voice said again. But Abalua, still calm, still silent, looked at them and whispered, "The mountain is waiting, but not yet." A heavy hush fell. One of the masked men dropped his staff. Another removed his mask, just a boy, barely older than Abalua himself. Tears in his eyes. Then, slowly, one by one, they turned and disappeared into the night, melting into the shadows like smoke into sky. That night, the air was thick with old voices. Drums played in the distance, though no one touched them. The sky flashed once, then went still. Even the stars seemed unsure. In the morning, Abalua asked for clay and ash. A joke brought it, though her hands trembled. The boy drew a wide circle on the ground, then pressed his palm into the center. When he lifted it, the shape glowed for a moment, then vanished. He looked up at her and said, "5 have come. 2 remain." A joke didn't ask what he meant. Some things are better left to arrive on their own. The village woke, but not with joy. There was a weight in the air, thick as pounded yam left overnight. Chickens refused to leave their coops. The river bubbled softly, like it was speaking under its breath. And the trees swayed without wind. Abalua had drawn again. Not on the ground this time, but on the wall of their compound, with ash and mud and something else nobody recognized. A spiral. Inside it, 7 dots. Around it, shapes that looked like people, bending. Some were bowing. One stood. Aramu rubbed it with a cloth. It didn't come off. A joke stood behind him, arms crossed, the child on her hip calm as ever. He said it's a gate, she whispered. A gate to what? He didn't say. They didn't speak much after that. That evening, Mom-in-law came again. She didn't knock. She walked straight in and sat by the fire, legs crossed, eyes distant. Her gray wrapper dragged behind her like a tale of old stories. She looked at Abalua and said, I once saw a bird with feathers like glass. It flew backward, then disappeared. That night, I dreamt of a storm. Nobody asked what that meant. Abalua walked up to her and touched her knee. The glass bird is coming, he said. She smiled sadly. I know. Later, thunder rolled across the sky without lightning. It sounded like footsteps. Heavy ones. That night, everyone heard the voice. Not loud. Not clear. But deep. So deep it didn't come from the air, it came from the ground. From the walls. From inside. Choose. Some villagers ran into the forest. Others locked their doors and placed charms at every corner. But a joke stood still, holding her son like he was the answer and the question both. He slept through it all. In the morning, the ash drawing on the wall had changed. The dots had shifted. Now only 6. A joke counted again. Still 6. Abalua opened his eyes and said, One has turned away. That day, the chief came to visit. Not with guards. Not with staff. Just his old cane and a basket of cola. He sat before the child and asked, What must we do? Abalua looked at him for a long time, then said, You must remember what you've forgotten. The chief nodded, though it was clear he didn't understand. Before he left, Abalua touched his hand and whispered, The tree remembers. Go ask it. That evening, the chief sat beneath the irako tree until the stars bled into the sky. Then he rose and went home, eyes shining with something close to fear. The next morning, the village square had 7 piles of white feathers. No footprints. No explanation. Only feathers. And a cold breeze, even though the sun was hot. By the next moon, no one called him a child anymore. They didn't know what to call him. Prophet. Spirit. Keeper. Even his name, Abalua, was now whispered, not spoken. Like it had grown teeth. The women at the stream stopped gossiping. The men in the palm grove sharpened their cutlasses for no reason at all. The air was full of tension, like the village was waiting to exhale but couldn't. A joke noticed it first. The sky had changed. It was still blue, still high, but too quiet. Birds flew in straight lines. Clouds stopped drifting. Once, a hawk hovered over the village for hours, wings still, as if held up by invisible strings. Abalua pointed at it and said, That's the watcher. She didn't ask what it was watching for. Aramu had started building fences around their compound. Not high ones, symbolic ones. Boundaries. Warnings. But Abalua walked past them like mist through fingers. One night, he vanished. Not stolen. Not lost. Just gone. A joke found the door open. His sleeping mat empty. The fire still warm. No footprints. She screamed. The whole village searched. Lanterns bobbed like fireflies. Names were shouted. Drums beat in panic instead of rhythm. But nothing moved. Not even a leaf. Until sunrise. There he was. Sitting beneath the irako tree. Awake. Smiling. Hair shining like dew on spiderwebs. A joke ran to him, falling to her knees, hugging him so tight even the wind stepped back. I followed the line, he said softly. What line? She asked, trembling. The one only I can see. She wanted to ask more. But he placed his hand on her chest and whispered, Don't worry. You're part of the 7. 7 again. That number had become a shadow, always near, never still. Mama-in-law came again, this time walking with help. Her knees had finally caught up with her age. She sat beside Abalua and said, "The gate will open soon, won't it?" He nodded. "Yes. The sixth will return. Then the last will rise." That night, the dreams came. Every villager had one. Some saw rivers running backward. Others saw birds flying underground. A few saw themselves as children again, playing beside fires that never died. But all of them, every single one, heard a voice say, "Prepare." Morning brought silence. Then, from the west, the dust came. Thick. Orange. Spiraling like a storm. And within it, figures. Not walking. Not running. Gliding. The seventh, perhaps. Or something else. The dust didn't move like normal dust. It didn't drift. It didn't scatter. It came in spirals, folding in on itself like cloth being twisted by unseen hands. It carried no scent. No sound. Just a hum, low, steady, like a song made by stone and wind. Abalua stood in the open, eyes wide, arms slightly raised, as though welcoming old friends. A joke wanted to grab him. Pull him. Hide him. But her feet stayed rooted. Not fear, something older. Like standing at the mouth of a story and knowing your name is already written inside. The gliding figures came closer. 7. Each wrapped in cloth that shimmered between colors. Not bright. Not dull. Just strange. Faces hidden. Feet never touching ground. They stopped before the Irako tree, their formation like a question mark. One stepped forward. Without lifting its head, it spoke. Not with voice, but with air. The words landed inside people's ears, not outside them. The gate has chosen. Villagers trembled. Even Baba Ojo, who once spat at spirits and mocked thunder, dropped to his knees and covered his head. Abalua took one step forward. A joke gasped. But he turned and smiled. "It's only a door, Mama. I won't go through alone." Then he raised his right hand, and the drawing from their wall appeared again, this time, glowing faintly on his palm. The spiral. The 7 dots. But now, they pulsed, one by one, like a heartbeat. The air changed. The Irako tree bent. Not the leaves. The trunk. A sound rolled out, not a crack, not a roar, something like memory being broken open. The 7th figure stepped forward and lowered its hood. A child. No older than Abalua. Hair like coal. Skin like polished earth. Eyes glowing gold. They didn't speak. They just walked to each other and touched palms. And the ground lit up beneath them. Symbols danced. Not written. Not drawn. Just appeared. The villagers watched, silent as stone, as the 2 children circled each other once. Twice. Then stopped. The other 6 figures bowed. The Irako tree released a deep groan. And the dust. It folded inward and vanished. No breeze. No fade. Just gone. The 2 children turned toward a joke. Both smiling. "We remember now," they said together. Aramu placed his hand on his chest. "I feel it," he whispered. "But I don't understand it." Mama-in-law nodded, her eyes wet. "You're not meant to. Not yet." The villagers remained quiet. Not from fear. Not even from awe. From knowing that something had shifted, forever. The ground stayed warm for days. Not burning, just humming. Like a drum still echoing after the last strike. Crops began to sprout without planting. Rivers cleared themselves. And for the first time in years, the village dogs wagged their tails without barking at shadows. But no one spoke of the night under the Irako tree. Not out of fear. Out of reverence. Abalua and the coal-haired boy, who now stayed beside him like a second breath, moved like twins. They said little, slept even less. But when they laughed, the wind swirled in circles. When they frowned, clouds gathered low and slow. A joke watched them with quiet love, her heart full of wonder and something close to fear. Not for them, but for the world that might not understand. One morning, Abalua placed a smooth stone in her palm. It was round and warm, pulsing like a living thing. "Keep this," he said. "When the sky forgets its color, it will remember." She kissed his forehead. Didn't ask questions. The villagers began to bring offerings again. But not out of duty, out of deep, silent gratitude. They didn't call him a seer anymore. They didn't call him anything. They just greeted him with a hand over the chest, a bow of the head, a single word, peace. The 7 figures never returned. The spiral never appeared again. The child with golden eyes remained, though no one knew his name. He followed Abalua like a story that hadn't been written yet. And then, one morning, they vanished. No footprints. No wind. Just absence. A joke didn't cry. She simply stood at the spot where they once played, held the warm stone in her hand, and whispered, "Go well." Years passed. Trees grew where they walked. Water sprang from the places they had sat. The goats still came to the window. Mom-in-law died with a smile, saying she'd seen the gate open once more in her dreams. Baba Ojo, now quiet and soft, carved small spirals into the village drums. And a joke. She grew old gently. Like a song hummed over a pot of soup. Her back bent, her hair silver, but her eyes held light. Because deep down, she knew. The white-haired boy who came after 15 years was never just a child. He was a path. And those who walk it never return the same.